Well, the car market in China is a huge market, and they happen to be located in China. So that's the main focus of BYD. I think the first cars they will try and bring here will be for fleets in California where we have environmental troubles and so on. And there may be a market for electric cars with that. And of course, there are various subsidies that come to people who use electric cars. I have some relatives who commute into Washington, D.C., and they can only use the fast lane on the freeway if they buy a Prius, and that's been very helpful to Toyota. And we'll see a lot more of that sort of thing. Generally speaking, I think BYD is an interesting company. If you stop to think about it, here's one of 8 children of a peasant that becomes a famous engineering school professor, and before he's reached 50, he's won the equivalent of China's Nobel Prize, and he has created a company which has 180-some thousand employees, a landholding about the size of Macau, and 100 and some million square feet of buildings. It's a very interesting startup company.
What percent of the cars do you think in 2030 will be electric?
Not many.
I shouldn't
I
have
think
asked.
society, it's like the wind power that's being subsidized in Iowa. We should subsidize electric car in various ways, as they do in Washington, D.C., by letting them use the fast lane on the freeway in order to get the technology going so that we can wean ourselves from oil more quickly. So I think there will be more subsidies and there will be more electric cars, but I'm not expecting a sudden revolution. Yeah. I drove the latest version of BYD's electric car. I was driven around the block Tuesday, and I was flabbergasted at how much improved that car was. It's simply amazing how fast people in China are learning to do what took us a long time to learn. And the world is getting very much more competitive. I think it is quite interesting that we got into BYD because BYD is surfing along on the developing edge of new technology, and that is not, we have always bragged about avoiding that. Isn't that a fair statement?
That's fair.
And yet here we are. I think it's because we've shown some capability for learning, and I think the BYD investment is going to work out very well, and I think it'll work out very well in a way that gives great pleasure to all of us shareholders, because I think they're going to help solve some significant problems of the world. And that place is, I spoke with pride about Kiewit. They tried harder. They were more self-disciplined. That's the way I feel about BYD. And it's a pleasure to associate with such people. And in my life, those are the people with whom I've achieved the most. So as far as I'm concerned, we found our own kind, except they're better. And we may do more of that. And we wouldn't have felt confident enough to go into venture capital typically with just a bright young man with an idea, no matter how brilliant.
Not me.
No, I wouldn't either. But BYD had won its spurs in life by the time we found it. They had accomplished things that struck me as almost impossible to do, and yet they'd done them. And so I don't think that's the last unusual thing that Berkshire will do, and the last one that'll work. And
so what I would like to understand is if you can make it more concrete. Recently, you make investment in BYD, a company in China that makes batteries and also electric cars, which are arguably technology companies. So can you sort of go through the example and see how you sort of like analyze the case and sort of ask questions that helped you make the decision to invest in such a company? Thank you.
Charlie deserves 100% of the credit for BYD, so I'm going to let him answer that.
Well, it's an interesting example because Berkshire would not have made an investment in BYD if the opportunity had come along 5 or 10 years earlier. And it shows that the old men are continuing to learn, and that's absolutely essential. Berkshire would have a lower potential than it does if we had stayed the way we were. And so you were absolutely right in calling attention to this episode. Again, Dave Sokol helped. I wasn't at all sure I could get Warren to do this all by myself, so I inveigled Dave into going over to China, and the two of us were able to help the learning process.
Well put. Well put.
Does BYD remain as attractive a long-term investment now as it was when you acquired your stake? If so, why? Has BYD's recent pattern of unexplained product launch delays affected your confidence in the operation?
Charlie's the BYD expert, so I'm going to let him start on that one.
Well, of course, the price is still way higher than the price Berkshire paid, and so almost by definition, it's not quite as cheap as it was then. Any company that tries to move as fast as BYD does, and on as many fronts, is going to have various delays and glitches. But I would say I'm quite encouraged by what's going on, and I expect delays and glitches. They got in trouble in the auto distribution, but they tried to double auto sales every year for 6 years, and it worked the first 5 times.